Okay, let's look at some data. So Element just started reporting new data in a way that they hadn't reported before. I think it's fascinating. So as you can see, this is the gray line over here is new listings. And the black line is new signed contracts. This is for co-ops in Manhattan. So of course, COVID happened and contracts went into the toilet, as did new listings, but you're seeing a percolation right here showing up. This is Manhattan condos, same shape with a hard upturn in the recent weeks. This is Brooklyn co-ops, same thing, even sharper turn. This is Brooklyn condos, same shape, even sharper turn. So whatever's happening in Brooklyn, I don't, maybe somebody can chime into the chat box, which I can't see, just to tell everybody, if you're doing business in Brooklyn, are you feeling that? Because the numbers look pretty awesome. And this is single family in Brooklyn. So it's just a little spike in listings, but not so much in purchase activity. That's probably just because it's more expensive and that market moves a little slower. Now, here's some interesting data from Property Shark. This is residential sales, March, April, May, and June, weekly figures for last year and this year. And this is us off to a pretty good start at the beginning of the year. So this is March, week 3, and then you see the volume of deals just plummet into COVID. So this is COVID. The interesting thing that I see here is you see this, if you connect the dots of the last 4 weeks, it's a significant increase in number of sales. And I just, we're starting to see that spring market volume is starting to dribble into June now. So that's just very consistent, nice upward curve of deals. So I told you this was going to happen. And lo and behold, it's happening. Okay, so this is pricing data, you guys. So this is pretty cool. June, it doesn't have the reason that's an asterisk is because we don't have all of the data from this month yet, right? But the point is that this change, it's like, I think the actual numbers are like 740 to 717, are not showing a 20% fall, right? Like I keep on telling people, like you're expecting, everybody's like, oh my God, prices are gonna be falling. And I'm like, yes, they are gonna be falling, but they do not expect some 25% haircut. And this data, by the way, these deals probably were signed right around, COVID closing in on us. So it'll be interesting to see June, the late June data and the July data and stuff like that. But early indication, I mean, if this bar had been down here somewhere, I'd be feeling a little bit like I got that very, very wrong. But from what it's looking like right now, I think this is like a 5% drop. And I think it's going to go down more, by the way, because I think this is still somewhat blended data about when these contracts were signed, but I'm not feeling a 25% drop. This was a article in the Real Deal about new developments, and so they were talking to new development marketers, and I think it was Kelly, I think her name is Kelly Mack. If you had to answer, the COVID discount to date has only proven to be 4%. And, she's the head of Corcoran Sunshine, by the way. So when she says we've seen a decline of 4%, she's not talking about one data point. she's talking about probably a third of the market. I mean, that's how big they are. So this is a super significant data, because it's not one data point, and it's coming from the person who probably controls more new development sales by units than anyone else in the city. I'm not saying that that price isn't going to come down from here. All I'm saying is this is not like some tsunami hit us and it was wanton destruction. This is, it's going to have an effect, but it is not the horrific effect that a lot of people were worrying about. Okay, so this is, the Wall Street Journal has been very one-sided in its reporting, in my view, of what's happening with the urban situation. And I'm going to go into that more. The red data here is these are relocations, okay? And the blue line, the blue lines are 2019 number of people that relocate from one city to another or whatever, change their location. They don't stay in the same area where they're buying a new house in the same town. They're relocating to some other place. So you see this spike of relocations that happen around COVID. But of course now, and they're like, oh my God, everybody's leaving New York. But of course you'll now see that the relocations are less than they were. Yes, we're gonna see relocations. Yes, this is sort of predictable data, but again, I think it's going to calm down into the second half of this year. This was their sort of breathless headline. When workers can live anywhere, many ask, why do I live here? Now, I think here's the relevant takeaway here. So everybody knows Twilio, and if you don't, you should. Because it's integrated with command is how you text people. They've got a pretty big operation. And during, I think it was early May, yeah, early May, they were thinking about giving everybody the opportunity to live and work remotely. You know, one-time shot. You want to go live in the Hudson Valley and work from there? Go ahead. They are already rethinking that. And out of the 3,000 workers they had, only 15 asked to move permanently. Let me say that again. Of their 3,000 workers that were offered to move out of wherever they are and get into some rural area and work with a Wi-Fi and whatever, 15 of them said yes. As I said before, this is not a tsunami. 15 out of 3,000 is not a tsunami. I don't know how else to put it. But I mean, and this is good data. And then they also say this in the article, and they say it way down in the bottom. But Manhattan always seems to rise again, and urban centers like New York and San Francisco have continued to be gathering places for young talent to congregate and companies to find it. Now we've come to the point. The sort of narrative that because of our density and because of subways and because of the expense, that New York City was going to be completely hollowed out. That breathless narrative has been perpetrated by the Journal, by, frankly, some of you, some of us in the industry, because human beings have this natural tendency to overreact to extreme news. I mean, overreact. And going back to 9/11, and I keep saying this, but I'm going to say it again. People moved out of the city. Did it happen? Yeah, it happened at the margin. It's not like, oh my God, a year later, there were tumbleweeds going down Broadway. New York felt exactly the same, right? In terms of the density. But did some people on the margin move out to the suburbs? Yeah, they did. And then what happened? 2 years later, they moved back, right? For lots of reasons. One, they probably just didn't want to eat at chain restaurants any longer. There's no culture out there. And there's a reason that people are attracted to the electricity of an urban center like New York City. And that is maybe not entirely missing, but largely missing if you're living in Armonk. You know what I'm saying? You can still get to it from Armonk, but it is not the same as living there. Hold on, I'm just gonna remute everybody. And I think it's really important to be able to convey this point to your clients. They are looking to you for rational, rational information that can be substantiated with a theory, if not fact, hopefully both, right? And for us to just read this journal article and be like, it's over for New York, and say, the market's going to be down 25%, everybody's going to move out. I think you're doing your clients a disservice. And I think by engaging in that narrative, you are you're not showing the professionalism that our clients expect of us, right? They deserve that level of professionalism. And it requires you to not just be swayed immediately from the breathless headlines, yeah? This is a pretty cool article. Youth Movement, a generational shift in preference for urbanism. This is by an organization called the City Observatory. And if you don't know who these people are, I would get on their website, like write it down, get on their website and check it out. There's a lot of like well-written, well thought out, deep articles. And they, in fact, published a response piece to some of the journal stuff. And they pointed out to this survey. So the headline says it all, right? People of the age where they are looking to establish themselves professionally and make their fortunes in the world, more and more and more are coming to urban centers. It's not less and less and less, And I just want to have a little talk with you guys, or rather, I'm going to talk at you guys because it's hard to have a conversation with however many of you are on this call at once. That this demographic change is not something that's going to be undone by the coronavirus. The coronavirus is an acute event. Yeah? This sort of thing, when we're talking about movement over decades, is a chronic thing. I don't mean chronic in a bad way. I just mean it doesn't go away. Whereas the acute effect can come and go. But this chronic effect of brain drain from especially rural, but also suburban areas to the city of 20s, 20 to 40 somethings is maybe temporarily affected, but it is like the tide. The tide is going to continue to roll in, and and you know it is not going to stop. And this is what I want you guys to get. If you're coming, the people that come to New York City come here and they know they're in a very deep pool here, right? It's a really deep pool. And the smartest, the most talented, the best looking, all of the superlatives, those people show up in New York, right? And what happens is, if you can't cut it in that pool, you go home and you live on your mother's couch. And that happens every single year. You see people move into a 3-bedroom share and they can't cut it, and because the pool is deep and the competition is fierce, and they go home. The people that can cut it are the smartest, the best, the brightest, the most driven, the most informed people this country has to offer. And they're here because they want to be around other people like that. Are you guys following me? You don't get that if you're working remotely from Hudson Valley with Wi-Fi. There is no connectivity to other people in the office, and there's no connectivity to the senior people that are going to further your career. How do you think your career is going to go if you move to the Hudson Valley and work off your kitchen table? Where is the path to managing director in that? There is no path. That is a dead end. You see what I'm saying? It is, your future is already behind you if that is your choice. Now, because there's going to be somebody who's aggressive as hell, working on that relationship with the managing director that they can work on in a way that you can't from your kitchen table in the Hudson Valley. Do you guys not understand that point? And it is because of that, like, basic phenomenon, that people that come here are aggressive, smart, looking to make their fortunes in tech, in finance, in name the field. That aggression is going to keep them here because they want big things for themselves, and it's not sitting at the kitchen table in Hudson Valley. Okay. So I just, the reason I'm spending so much time on this, and I'm sorry if I'm boring you, is because I want you to understand that this narrative is way overblown, and you're going to see it in demand, and two years from now, our prices will be back and all those people will be back. I'm just, I'm just telling you. All right, changing topics a little bit. Your interest rates continue to stay low. These are crazy numbers, you guys. I mean, you know, I've been telling you for a while that interest rates are going to stay low. And but even me, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So while interest rates are bumping around 3%, and at least in the 3 handle, if not occasionally slipping into the 2 handle, which is something that I can easily see happening, that is not the environment in which real estate prices collapse. You guys understand that? This is another point. You just do not see price collapses when financing is like so freaking cheap. It is so cheap. It's really going to put a floor under how much these prices can go down. And could they go down 10%? Yes. Could they go down 15%? They could. Could they go down more than that? I really don't think so with interest rates at 3. I just not feeling it. Not feeling it, you guys. So when you're talking to your clients and they need some reassuring, show them headlines like this. On the other hand, we have a pretty powerful looking chart for about loan forbearance. This was different weeks, and it's pretty telling. These are the different portfolios and what percentage of the portfolios are in forbearance. In some cases, Ginnie Mae at almost 12% of their loans in forbearance. Fannie and Freddie lower just because of how they do their loan origination. But the point is there's been a huge spike in this stuff. I mean, if you look back at March 15th, how low these forbearance percentages are, everythtiing under 1%. So that's exploded. It seems though, point number one, it seems to have leveled off. You see these flattish parts of the curve over here? We're not looking like this anymore. So the damage seems to be done, and at least in the short term, it seems to be stabilizing. So that's point number one. Point number two is there's going to be some portion of the market that is affected by this. I don't see it hugely in New York City, just because of the co-op situation and things like that. But this is worth looking at. There's going to be some distress in those people though that took out these that took forbearance, because it's not like they write you a grant. You have to pay it back, and that payback is going to be a bitch, especially if their economic situation is under stress because of unemployment or whatever else. Now you owe more than you did before on a monthly basis, and you may still be unemployed or whatever. So at the margin, you're going to see some trades because of this, but I don't expect it to affect our market very much. Maybe, the non-Rebney land, Queens, non-Rebney land, Brooklyn, Staten Island, not that I care too much about Staten Island, but you did see some foreclosure activity there in the last downturn, and of course you'll see some of it in the Bronx. So everybody saw this headline. I'm just putting it up here just to clarify one thing. It's not a huge point. When the rent board freezes rent, this is just rent stabilized tenants, you guys, rent control and rent stabilization. So this doesn't, just in case there's newbies here that don't understand this point, regular free market rents are not frozen. They can go up and down to market demand. And those free market apartments are probably going to drop in price because people that were disproportionately impacted by the lockdown were people in hospitality, that's hotels, people in restaurants, actors, people like that. Now, by and large, those people are not homeowners, they're renters, right? And this is exactly the class of people that are going home to live on their mother's couch. So multifamily market is going to see some pain from those people leaving. I don't think it's going to affect the sales market very much, because even if you're talking about a relatively cheap one-bedroom $700,000 co-op somewhere, how do you get a $140,000 down payment post-tax money working as a waiter? That does not happen unless you have rich parents. So, and then if you have rich parents, you're not moving out, and it's fine anyway. But by and large, the classes of people that were the most affected were the renting class. So expect to see some pressure on rents, far more than you're going to see in sales. And this was kind of interesting. This is a study that was just published by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. This is about, they go out and talk to thousands of business people, and they create this data set. And it's service firms, New York, Northern New Jersey, Southwestern Connecticut. So this is like our greater metro area. Now, of course, this is COVID, this precipitous drop. But the thing that I want to point your attention to is this precipitous rise. So the business sentiment is improving from what looks like a relative nadir. And I just, it's important to know that that's happening, you guys. And let me break this data out for you a little bit more. So that diffusion index is comprised of a bunch of other indices. And here are some of them. So business activity, these are asking people, like senior business people in the service industry, where do you think we're going to be 6 months from now? So they're starting to think 6 months from now, things are going to be, I mean, that sentiment is improving dramatically on business activity, business climate, number of employees. You see that V-shaped curve in all cases. So the reason I bring this up is because, we hear about it's the death of this, the death of real estate. I mean, the death of retail. It's the death of restaurants. It's the death of Broadway. It's the it's just those breathless headlines that I was excoriating earlier in today's call. They start to penetrate your brain. And you overswing in your mind what's actually happening. But if you look at what business people are actually saying is going to be happening 6 months from now, it is a dramatic improvement and almost back to where it was, in some cases even better, depending on the index that you're looking at. So it feels bad to be locked up in your house, even if some of you are meeting with each other with your masks off and walking around and doing that sort of thing. But being in your house all the time and reading these breathless headlines, you start to think, oh my God, the world is coming to an end. And it's almost like the end already happened. And that is that nadir. So I think that, again, I'm sort of rounding out the story with another perspective. Here's yet another perspective for you on this. So this is something that the New York Times has been publishing every day. And this data, admittedly, I think I started creating these slides on Sunday. So this data is 3 days old, but my basic point is here. So this is COVID cases. Okay, New York City had 392,000, right? We're like, oh my God, that's a lot. Sorry, New York City had 216,000. New York State had 392,000. In New York City, we had 2,500 cases per 100,000 people. And we want to put that in perspective. And keep in mind, it is that density of cases and density of deaths. In New York City, 257 deaths per 100,000. Because when you think about these number of deaths, like if you think about the total number of deaths, right? It seems overwhelming. but you really need to think about it as a percentage of how many people are here. Does that make sense? Like my hometown in Massachusetts has, I think it's like 260 people in it. Okay, every single last person could die in there, and it's less than what was dying every single day in New York City. Would it be worse if every single last person died? Yes, that is a worse case than what we had. So you kind of have to scale this. So let's look at some other places. Lee, Arkansas, 6,000 per 100,000. Buena Vista, Iowa, 8,000 per 100,000. East Carroll, Louisiana. Has anybody ever heard of East Carroll? I've never heard of East Carroll, but they had 4,500, almost 4,600 cases per 100,000. The reason that I'm pointing this out is because of the narrative that New York City is over, right? It doesn't help you to go to East Carroll because you want to get out of a densified, MTA-driven urban environment, because the COVID is actually worse in that location than it is in New York City. And more of these are showing up, you guys. You've seen those spikes in Arizona, in Florida, in Texas, in smaller cities throughout. And my point is, a lot of people took away that the reason we had so many cases was because of it's New York City and we're the densest. But do not forget that in 1918, I talked about this before, but say it again, New York was like 17th worst. Like we were not even near the top. And in 1918, if you can imagine the density in places like Lower East Side, Chinatown, which was largely Italian immigrant at the time, and other places like that, where we're some of the densest places on the planet, and we were only 17th. So what this tells me is that the huge spike that we had in the city had to do with disastrous public policy promulgated on us by our bickering governor and mayor, and they just took too long to shut us down. So don't think for a second that we're doomed by coronavirus because we happen to live in New York City. That's my point. All right. I'm sorry if I'm beating this to death today, but I really, really think it's an important narrative. And that's it. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'd like to talk a little bit with you all.